Okay, welcome everyone to Medicine. It's so wonderful to share this space with you. I want to share some really good news with everyone, which is that we have an echo again. An echo. It's weird. I don't know what's going on. Um, let's go. Well, let's see. Let's change a whole another thing here. What happens? Okay, how's that now? Is that about echo for everyone? Let's drop there again. Uh, one more switch. Okay. Okay, how's that going? Um, it's great. Okay, so we're gonna go with that. The only thing about this version of the sound is that you're gonna get a little bit of background noise from the computer and from whatever else is happening in the background. But we're doing the best that we can. But anyhow, what was the good news that I wanted to share? The good news is that I'm having a pretty good skin day, as you can probably see. So that's what I wanted to share. And I think that is the blessings of Medicine Buddha. Um, so I think that should be lots of encouragement to continue your practice because you too can have really wonderful skin. Now, this is really interesting because um, you don't often get so within like Tibetan Buddhism and with training, right, to be a Lama and through your retreat there, we go through these kind of series of prayers, and these prayers are very old. They come directly from just the lineage itself. And I swear to you, there's a prayer that we used to do every day in retreat, and we had to do it like the practice day and 3 year retreat is split into 4 what we call tuns, and tun is like means like practice period. So you had the early morning, mid morning, early afternoon, and evening tun, and then you get a break in between each practice period, each tun, and there would be different prayers that we had to do. Some prayers could take up to 30 minutes to recite and complete. Some of them took like a couple seconds. So one of the prayers that we did, I think, in the second tune every day, the mid morning practice session was the main session. That was always the longest session. And at the end of that session, we would do this prayer, which was literally actually praying for good hair and skin. I kid you not. It's because in like cultural based Tibetan Buddhism, like skin was good skin and hair and clear eyes, right? They were signs of good karma, of good merit. So to have that meant that like you had really good, you were really doing good things. It was one of the signs that you were, doing really good work in your lives and you would be born with good skin. Um, and, and clear eyes and good hair. Um, One day I need to actually find that. I have to find a lot of this stuff. I've been wanting to teach so much of this material, but I haven't touched it in years. It's so much, actually, in a retreat practice that we do. Um, it's just so much material, so many practices, so many prayers, sadhanas that like I don't like. People would be surprised at actually how many practices we're trained in because it's quite a few. Most of which I won't ever practice again as well. So anyway, enough of that. But anyway, welcome. This is Medicine Buddha. Welcome to those of you who are new. We don't usually start the session off with, check in about skin, but when have I ever been conventional? So as we begin, um, you can, whenever you want, you can go ahead and add prayer requests to the chat box. You can add questions to the Ask a Question section at the bottom of your screen. And we'll get started with practice in a couple of minutes. After I take a couple of minutes to wax poetic on a random thought that comes into my mind that I will skillfully link back to practice. So I'm waiting for that random thought to come. What have I been thinking about this week? Well, this week I think we're going to go back in terms of our practice to the practice we explored last week, which was really working with earth energy, working with internalized, external breath, external exhalation. I've been working a lot with pranayama this past week actually. I know probably pranayama isn't like everyone's favorite, so I'm trying to offer alternatives as we practice for those of us who can't really work with the breath. So we'll continue with that practice this week. And another short note about, so when we're working with the land, we're working with earth. I have practices that work with all the elements, right? And I introduce those in different venues. It's not always here, but some of you some of you who were with me this past December up in Southern Dharma, we did fire puja, we did fire prayer. And I always do at Southern Dharma up in the mountains, I always do fire prayer every time I'm able to teach there. So I do fire prayers. And maybe some of you are joining us next month in the UK for the residential retreat, where we'll be doing all kinds of pujas. I'll be with Sister Sadala Jackson, or as we like to say, Miss Jackson if you're nasty, and another member of our team, Daniel, we'll be teaching together. And we'll be going through a lot of different prayers, earth prayers, fire prayers. We're going to do some wind prayer as well. And of course, I'll introduce some of this, too, in our sessions here. So the elements are a huge part of this. And for me, earth is really important. Earth energy, I'm earth signs. Like I'm really like in Ayurveda, I'm like Kapha, which is like earth, and water, which basically is mud. So I feel really connected to the earth. So the earth is really accessible for me. Not to say that the elements aren't, but this is, also a part of Tibetan traditional medicine where we think about um, how the different elements show up in the different expressions of our bodies, particularly in the subtle energy body, which we've been working with as well. What we also worked with last week too is like learning, training to sense subtle energy in our bodies, because I think this is a really important part of practice, tantric practice in general, yoga, some Vedic practices, but particularly for medicine Buddha, like you're working with subtle energy. And any time when you're working with wisdom deities in tantric Buddhism, you're working with shifting, changing subtle energy. One of the ways we get into subtle energy is through the breath. We also use visualization as well, and we use movement. We don't do as much movement in this session, but that's all about developing a relationship to the subtle energy body, and learning how to like sense that, to feel it, like to feel the physical body, to experience the physical body, but also to experience the energy of the subtle energy body or the energetic body. But what we feel energetically with the body is what we can begin to feel in the world around us. And so when you become sensitive to energy, you become sensitive to the essence of everything, right? The essence, the essential nature of everything is space and energy. There's no form. There's just this, I'm not even using the word emptiness anymore. A lot of, mostly because it's just too hard to kind of pull people out of this interpretation of nihilism, like nihilism being just like empty, nothing, void, cold. I mean, it's so hard to explain people out of that, even though that's the translation that we get. I actually forget in terms of Tibetan what what word we're using, or what word we're translating emptiness from. Luminosity was all energy. Is luminosity. Luminosity in Tibetan is also. So that's what we call energy, or that's what I actually retranslate osal, which is luminosity, which is energy. I translate it into energy. Traditionally, you translate it into luminosity. So when we talk about the nature of things, the language that you use, or the two terms that you use to talk about the nature of the mind, the nature of phenomenal world, is emptiness and luminosity. That's very traditional. And I've let go of luminosity, and I've just been using the word energy. It's just energy, right? And so I'm letting go of emptiness and using space. So it's energy, like energy and boundless space is the nature of all of this. So yeah, shunyata, I heard someone use. So shunyata is suchness. So that's another way, suchness, shunyata, because when you're translating that directly from the Sanskrit, it's often like the next word that we use would be suchness. So shunyata is a suchness. as you would say, that's very traditional, the pregnant void. Like, it's pregnant, but still doesn't get us. Well, it doesn't get me there, right? So I often said suchness. It is empty, but there is suchness there. There's a somethingness there, but that doesn't still get me there. So I just kind of use space, boundless space and energy right now. That may change, um, but when we're talking about developing a sensitivity to energy, we're talking about that fundamental expression of the nature of everything, including our minds, right? Everything. Our minds, your computer, the earth, the elements, the Golden Girls, like all of that it arises. So this is why, the feminine aspect of the divine and tantric traditions is an expression of space, because we call space, well, let me go back, let me rearrange that. Space itself is conceived as the mother, because without space, there would be no room for the phenomenal world to arise. So space gives birth to the phenomenal world, right? And that's why the feminine aspect, the divine feminine aspect in Tantra traditions, we say is an emanation of space, right? So in Tantra, and in Buddha, in the Buddha side of this, we would say Tara, right, is the mother of all Buddhas. But Tara is an emanation of all divine feminine aspects of the tradition, right? So any feminine representation is considered the mother. Now, this is what I'm working on. When I talk about, so now this isn't exactly what I was going to get into tonight, but I want to keep this real short, because if I don't keep it short, it's going to turn into a 2-hour talk, and we need to get into practice. So we talk about space. So sacred duality, right? So everything arises from space and emptiness. Nothing actually exists except for the space and this energy. And the energy is where the phenomenal world arises from. So space is the container, and in that container, there's a material, there's a energetic experience from which the phenomenal world arises. That energy can be considered the sacred father aspect. Whereas when they're coming together, they form the essence of everything. Now, in the relative aspect of things, the relative is where we are now. The relative world is built on binaries. And though it is important for us to challenge to always challenge the binary, but it's also important for us to recognize that there is a kind of duality functioning that, if we can use it skillfully, takes us back. That leads us actually into the unification of everything, the oneness. Now, I may scare people, because in the new book, I'm using the word God. like God, like I'm talking about God, um, to represent what I think we, what we're, to talk about what we're supposed to be talking about when we talk about God, God being the expression of everything, not this person, not this one unified conscious being directing the universe, but just the expression of space energy, you know, because that's we're trying to get back to God. And within like mysticism, you know, I would say at least within all the mysticism that I've encountered, both in Christian mysticism and tantric mysticism, like in general, what we're trying to do is get back to that essence. But being relative beings, like in the world of phenomena and appearance, you know, we need skillful ways to lead us back into that oneness. So one of the things that arises is the duality of, excuse me, the the divine mother, divine father, you know, um, and the divine mother is expressed through space. The divine father is expressed through form. You know, so it sounds like the Heart Sutra. Again, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. I know, we have to work through that as well. But space being the mother, form being the father, each point to each other, right? Each points to each other. And this isn't about relative gender either. So these sacred energies are just two kinds of energies that we begin to align, with our understanding of how dualities function together to create wholeness. Um, so what I'm trying to do in the next book is somehow, I think I'm doing it so far, is kind of create this way of thinking, not way of thinking, but this, mm, not model, but a theory. I guess a theory, maybe is a practice theory, that where I'm able to overlay this across multiple spiritual paths to recognize a kind of common project, a common goal for these paths, and to offer a practice to get into it, right? Like how do I, for instance, so here's a basic practice. How do I love the mother, and how that love of the mother leads me back to the essence of everything, or to God, you know? On the other hand, how do I love the Father, the Sacred Father, which is actually the edginess of the work that I'm doing, is that I am attempting to reestablish the the sacred divine Father in practice, and how the divine Father leads us to the mother, how the divine mother leads us back to the Father, and how together that is the experience of God or essence, or that's Buddhahood, Buddha nature. Um, and to explore how the practice of the sacred, the divine Father. I'm still playing, figuring out the language, but how the practice of the Father has been a part of the ways in which patriarchy has arisen, become a thing, because the risk that we encounter when developing a relationship to form is that we begin to believe, or the risk is when we start believing that form is solid and permanent instead of illusionary and spacious and open. So when we lose the capacity to understand how form is just an expression of God, or just space and energy, it becomes solid and real. The solidity becomes rigidity, right? And that rigidity creates this connection to our understanding of gender, and that rigidity becomes this really powerful way that we attempt to create, well, permanence, right? But to create consistency, to create sameness, to simplify things, right? Right. And then how, when we really start taking that permanence, that illusion of rigidity seriously, how that turns into, or how that turns into relative forms of systematic structural violence. I love how, who's that, Byrne just said prayers for Lama Rod, because I think they realize that I'm just wading out into the ocean here. So what I'm doing, I mean, I've been wanting to write about patriarchy. I've done so much work around patriarchy, and how some of you have come to me, but so much. You so you we are so I've been wanting to so one of the reasons I've not written exclusively about patriarchy is because so many people are doing an amazing job on it. I don't know why I could add to that, right? But what I'm actually beginning to understand now, that there's a different way that I can talk about it that comes directly out of the system of practice, where we're talking about how rigidity in practice starts to back up, how it creates this, I don't know, I can feel the energy, I just can't articulate it. It creates this wall that we begin to relate to, and that wall becomes the foundation for structural violence. So this is actually the subtle energetic level of supremacies. When and then, so you go to the other side of this when we talk about how the divine feminine works in traditions. Divine feminine is space, so therefore there's a fluidity. So we begin to distrust fluidity as being uncontrollable, erratic, complex, and then there's this terror of that, because that space, that wide openness, that fluidity can't be controlled. But, as someone, like I'm a devotee to the mother. Like that's I'm a mother devotee. And what that means is that um, I've practiced really strongly, a lot with female deities and the idea of the mother, which I have gotten a lot of support in with my Swami Gardedi. Um, what was I saying? And so, but now connecting to how this idea of the Sacred Father has actually been a huge part of my practice as well. I just have never named it. And trying to work with understanding how the Sacred Father shows up for me in practice, because I am also devoted. My main male deity is Mahakala, and particularly six-armed Mahakala, which we call Chadrupa. And I've always felt very close to Chadrupa in practice. And over the past 2 years or so, I've gotten very close to Kali, to Kali, and Kali and Mahakala are, again, Sacred Father, Sacred Mother. They're very related because the Kali's expression of space is more about, well, Kali gets us into the expression of space by severing this fixation to ego. I think how she does that is by disrupting our relationship to time. Kali is related to time, right? To the illusion of time. So once you disrupt time, you disrupt everything. Because time, particularly linearism, which is what time represents, is one of the ways the ego forms itself. It needs linearism. Like it needs everything to go forward in an ordered way, and non-linear is when everything's happening at once, right? There's no back or forth or up and down. It's just like it just is. And so you can move in whatever direction you need to move in. But time is what keeps linearism bound. And so when time is disrupted, everything just goes out the window. And that's why I have this huge kind of like cloth painting of Kali on my wall. So I just keep looking up at her, looking at the visible, the aesthetics that she represents. That's why one of the reasons she's depicted with severed heads and blood and everything is that dissolving of time is so severe for us. It feels violent because we're so utterly attached. We're so attached to time. And organizing the whole world around time, past, present, future, right? And when there's no time, who are you? And so with Mahakala, I believe, my theory is that Mahakala is a reflection. But this isn't like, this is so, like, all of this work, these theories around deities and gods and these levels of beings and so forth and everything, and how we understand what gods and deities are within Tantra practice. All this is so abstract. It's like it's like what Lauryn Hill said. Everything is everything, and so you can argue for anything to be related to anything, right? So because it is, like, everything is a reflection of everything, you know. Um, so when I talk about Kali and Mahakala being reflections, and there are multiple Mahakalas and Kalis. Like, there's this, you can go online and look at all the iconography of these different aspects of Kali and Mahakala. when I say the reflections of each other, they seem to be related to our fixations around linearism. You know. Well, I'm glad this is being recorded because I will never be able to remember this after we finish practice. Like there's a deep connection to linearism here that's being disrupted. But I also think that's being disrupted in all the yoga practice that we do in Tantric Buddhism, which is wonderful, is also dangerous. So it can be quite dangerous without the support. And this is why, coming back full circle to the earth, this is why earth practice is so really incredibly important, because the earth is the element that's grounding us. It pulls us back out of this non-linearism, back into a kind of skillful linearism, you know. Because what we're doing, no matter how awakened you are, if you're committed to the liberation of beings, you have to stay partially linear, while most of your experience perhaps is nonlinear, which is why, quite frankly, we get some of the personalities that we get when we have these enlightened beings. You know, they run the range because everyone's making different choices to maintain that balance. You know, everyone's like, once you reach that level of realization, that level of awakening, it becomes a real struggle to stay in the world, to stay in the body, right? Because non-linearism opens a door to an experience that lies beyond suffering, lies beyond pain. So it becomes seductive, right? It becomes seductive to, well, it becomes, the non-linearism becomes seductive because it takes us out of the violence of linearism. But if you are committed through the Bodhisattva vow to stay around to help people, then you then you're committed to a kind of tension of one part of your being within the linear timeline, another part of your being, probably most part of your being in this non-linearism. Within that tension that arises, you're making choices on how to manage the world. You're making choices to manage the tension. And one of the ways you manage the tension is actually by, getting eccentric. It's a nice way to say it. You get a little eccentric. Because that tension is energy that has to go somewhere, right? So it goes into living, because of different karmas that we all bring in, our different mixtures of karmas actually contribute to different expressions of personalities, So, for instance, like, what's a good example? Like Muktananda and Thich Nhat Hanh were very different teachers, And of course, I never got a chance to sit with Muktananda, but I know some of you did. That's why I'm mentioning. I know some of you in this space did study with Muktananda, and later Guru Maya. But I've known a lot of Muktananda practitioners, including Erica Huggins, who was one of the leaders of the Black Panthers, who was one of my oldest mentors. And some of you have studied with Thich Nhat Hanh, as well, and know a lot about Thich Nhat Hanh. So these are very different. Those are different energies. that arise, you know. Um, I study in Kashi, which is the tradition created by Ma Jayasati Bhagavati, who was completely out there, who was this Brooklyn woman from Coney Island, who was just like big hair, jewelry, clothes, makeup. Um, but I swear, when I listen to her, any recording of her, she takes me right to the mother. You know, um, and she is very different than my Tibetan teachers, particularly my root teacher. Completely different. You know. Those are just karmas. Those are karmas, different mix of karmas that express different personalities as one approaches or experiences awakening or enlightenment or just deep, profound realization. I like that word blessed. Um, um, eccentricity. Yeah, God, I can't even read this. Um, eccentricity, right? Blessed eccentricity. So it's a lot. I mean, it's like the closer, so the dilemma here, and we're gonna get right into practice soon. So I may actually just slip into practice, pretty soon without you knowing it. But like um the struggle here as one approaches awakening, which is again a disruption of linearism, is that everything that we've built around linearism begins to dissolve, like the structure, right? And that structure, again, is the expression of the sacred father, which we have misinterpreted as being rigid, right? So that rigidity is what lies at the root of structural violence, right? But when you get into the nonlinearism, time begins to disrupt, and all this rigidity begins to dissolve, and you get space. Your consciousness actually, expands, right? So it decentralizes itself from the physical body, so that nonlinear experience means that you begin to experience everything, past, present, and future, as one experience. Um, and it becomes harder to limit oneself, to create a container to keep one clustered in, maintained. Because the body was that. The body is that for most of us ordinary people. The body itself is the container. Once you begin to understand the illusion of rigidity, right? That illusion is the most sacred expression of the Father, is understanding that illusion. Then everything just begins to expand, right? So you're everywhere and doing everything, right? And all this energy that arises from actually having to stay in the body in this world, but also expanding into the formless, into space, into the mother. Um, like all that energy has to go somewhere. If you are an avowed bodhisattva, then that energy goes. A lot of that energy goes into um, getting people free, right? Into the spiritual work of getting people free, teaching, practicing, everything like that. But also, that energy is also going into the expression of personality. Personality is like a net that's being cast wide, or it's like honey, you know, that attracts those of us looking for the sweetness of enlightenment, Or, as I like to say, it's like the milkshake that brings all the boys to the yard. You must understand that all this is going into the book now, because this is fucking brilliant. I am constantly looking for ways to build dharmic ideas around um, using our milkshakes to bring the boys to the yard. I just think that's brilliant. Um, this is also the risk. This is also the risk. Oh, Cal is mad. Oh, I'm gonna have to listen to that afterwards. We'll listen to that. That was anyway. I'm not gonna get into the hip hop. So this is the risk, and after this, we're gonna start practicing. This is the risk here. Um, it's extremely risky to be around beings who have transcended linearism. Um, Now that may be another talk. This is going to open up a whole other door that I don't want to get into because I want to practice. But that's when Pema Children talks about the fire. Like she talks about how being close to a teacher is like sitting next to a strong fire. That if you get too close, you get burned, which I think is such a brilliant imagery, right, to use. But that's the fire. Like you're with someone who isn't here, who isn't functioning within the same rigidity. Um, and it's hard, it's confusing. I can just say that in my experience, being around Norla Rinpoche, living with Norla Rinpoche, it was just too much. It was too much. Um, it was too much. It was just um, it's hard to hold the energy, the spontaneity, the depth, the intense compassion of beings like that, and you just need a break, you know. And the other risk too is that if there's not enough grounding, like I just I don't believe that having these awakening experiences means that like your ethics are perfect. So I think what that means is that there are aspects of the ego and the ego's function or relationship to the body that can become difficult to manage. Um, and I think that it's easy to cross a line with people because you see too much and you understand too much and you say, well, I'm just going to do this and this is going to get people free, but it's not the most skillful thing to do because people don't necessarily have the capacity to process whatever you're trying to do. This is why wrathful compassion, for instance, is real tricky, you know. Or you don't actually say wrathful compassion, you say wrath. Wrath means strong compassion, but wrathful meaning that the kind of compassion that gets to the point can be quite tricky if you're with someone who does that. It can be quite destabilizing, as I have experienced several times. Um, but I had the capacity to work with it over time. So, so that's the risk. You're with someone who's doing shit, and it's not clear often if you've consented to this or not. Um, And if the person being is really quite awakened, then their awakened energy stays around. This is what Guru Yoga. I mean, we do this. Like we actually do Guru Yoga in our practice. You may not have known it, but when you're touching, connecting to the realization of great awakened masters, that energy is still pulling. That energy is just the expression of God. All these enlightened beings doing are all they're doing is just channeling this particular energy of God into the body, into this realm, and filtering it in a way that makes it accessible for us to connect to it and use it to dissolve our own fixation to duality. If it's not that, then it's us connecting directly to these energies themselves, which are accessible through the personification of these energies into beings. And this is Tantra, this is wisdom deities here. I'm not talking about worldly gods. This is that's a whole nother thing to get into. Worldly gods are not enlightened beings. They're just very powerful beings. But they're still, what's the nice way to say this? They can still be difficult to deal with sometimes if you're not approaching them in the way that they like. That's another talk for another day. We actually have talked about this before. This is why we have initiations and traditions and rites and ceremonies, that we engage in, because worldly deities have very strong personalities and still have egos, and they like to be approached in certain ways. If you're going to approach them in certain ways, then there's trouble. Well, depending on how powerful. Well, there can be trouble if you are not aligned yourself with other powerful energies. We like to call that spiritual warfare. Well, that's one part of spiritual warfare. But wisdom deities arise out of God, are the essence of everything directly, and are nothing but benevolence, right? Because it's energy that knows itself, that transcends ego, that we shape. Like our consciousness shapes that energy so that it becomes something appropriate for us to metabolize. That's a little bit of quantum physics as well. Like that consciousness shapes energy. That consciousness is energy, and consciousness is an energy that possesses awareness, and that conscious energy can shape other energies. I have a feeling that some of you are furiously writing notes in your notebooks and everything, which I should be doing too. This is, so much of this is why um, this is why all this is really complicated. I mean, just like teachers and gurus and everything that's happening, and then all these deities, these energies and unseen beings. Like this is all like it gets real complicated, because so much is happening. Um, I would just say from my experience, right? It just takes years of practice. It just takes years of asking questions. It takes years of, just like, doing the practice. Like it's awareness of mind, it's prayer, it's devotion, it's heartbreak, it's pain, it's joy, it's being in relationship to all of this. Losing yourself sometimes in this kind of non-linearism because it becomes an experiment, you know. Um, and this is why there's so many. This is why we chase certain experiences that can open the door to these experiences. Well, certain paths that opens the door to these experiences of non-linearism. Um, but again, like the core of this, for me, within the realm of the bodhisattva is that the realized bodhisattva has to go through all of this and still be in the world and still perhaps look normal. I mean, so whatever normality is, you know, you know. you know. But to cut through all of this is the practice of connecting to the oneness, which I really hate. I don't really like using oneness. But I say essence? Essence is my language. Connecting to this essence, to the awakened consciousness or Buddha nature, or really I just say God, but that's confusing too for people. Like it's getting back to that, you know. So so let's just start. Let's get into practice. If I keep going, we won't ever practice. I personally need to practice as well. Well, let's begin. Um, Again, if you're not already in a position that feels appropriate for you, find yourself there. Um, so when you're ready, I just really invite you to shift your attention to the weight of your body. So again, we shift our attention to the weight of the body because that's an expression of the energy, earth elemental energy, grounding, stability. Noticing the sensation of the body making contact with the seat that you're on. When you're ready, shifting your attention down to the earth, noticing the energy of the earth. And you don't, again, have to feel anything, but in this space, when I just think, I am touching the earth through my attention, my awareness. It's like my consciousness shifts down to the earth element and it touches the earth element. I don't have to feel anything for there to be a connection, but just believing that I'm connecting to the earth like this becomes stabilizing, particularly in our consciousness. It becomes like, oh, I'm connecting to something that's stabilizing me. Again, this is an expression, of one of the uses of the Seven Homecomings practice is this kind of connection with the earth. So maybe it's more accessible for you to experience the sensation of meeting the seat, being held by the seat, and that's fine as well. Either way is fine. But you can do both together. I am touching the earth energetically, and the earth is rising to meet me through the seat that's holding me. And I wonder, in this moment, can you just allow, or rather, can you trust the seat to hold you? What is it like to be held and trusting that you'll be held? So we're going to do something a little different with the practice. We're still going to connect to the earth energy. I want you to actually shift your attention to your heart center, right? The heart center, the heart chakra, being this kind of energy center that's associated with empathy, love, compassion, openness, and so forth. And if you're working with the breath directly, just imagine breathing in and out of the heart center. When you're ready, I invite you to begin reflection practice. Now, I want you to begin to reflect on your prayers, the prayers that you've offered, for those who've offered, or, prayers that are just personal that you haven't offered, but just reflecting on those prayers. What do you most need to see? Right? And everyone has something they need to see, averting war, right? Getting out of pandemic, praying for those we've lost, praying for loved ones. There's something for everyone to pray for right now, right? And imagine the energy of these prayers begin to awaken within your heart center, within the heart itself, the heart chakra. So in my practice, this feels as, when I'm thinking about some of the things that I'm praying for, I just feel that energy forming in my heart center. And that energy doesn't have to be comfortable. It can be anxiety, worry, sadness, despair, hopelessness. So that energy, of that prayer, allowing it to be housed right in the heart center. So we're getting into this edge of this duality that we've been talking about, the mother and the father, right? Where there's a rigidity that we misunderstood the aspect of the sacred father. And if we can just open that rigidity and allow that what feels to be permanent and solid and difficult to be released into the openness, spaciousness, the vastness of the heart center, of the heart chakra, then we are slowly allowing the sacred mother to awaken. Because the father leads to the mother leads to the father. Together they lead to the oneness. Not the oneness, the essence of everything. So just a few more moments here, then we're gonna start getting energy. Right? We're gonna start getting maybe some Shakti or some prana, moving up into the heart center. Other times I like to imagine in the same way that in the past we've done our ocean-like mind practice, that my heart rather is like it's just a boundless ocean, spacious, open, fluid, and nothing can overwhelm it, nothing can fill it up. It's just this ocean filled with this energy of love, kindness, the warmth of these liberatory energies. And so I'm often imagining offering my what feels like discomfort from prayer, like we're praying for the things that I need to see happen in the world, that worry, anxiety, and so forth. I'm just offering that into this vast sea of the heart center, of the heart chakra. That the hopelessness, the fear, the fatigue dissolves in this sea of essentially deep love. And how all of this is the coming together of these dualities of the mother and the father into this experience of space and energy, where everything is everything. Just a few more moments here before we return back to the earth. Okay, when you're ready, I invite you to shift your attention down the um, to the tailbone, essentially to the bottom of the spine, which is where the root chakra is located. The root chakra connects us to earth energy. So the chakra associated with groundedness, home, stability, safety. And for some of us, that chakra can be in a lot of trauma, where we begin to experience a lot of unsafety, a lot of ungroundedness, instability. So to begin to work to help that, we're going to start absorbing this energy of the earth first up into that root chakra, the tail of the spine, and slowly up into the body. Okay? So shifting our attention again to the tail of the spine and imagine that we're breathing in and out of the bottom of the spine. And if you're not working with the breath, just we'll come back and get you in just a moment. But breathing in, inhaling into that root chakra, the tail of the spine, exhaling out. And you're exhaling out of the body here to begin with. So it's like you're inhaling up into the tail of the spine, you're inhaling back down out of the body. And we're going to reverse that in a second. All right. So we're going to shift slightly and going deeper into the practice. So turning our attention back down into the earth and beginning to just name, identify the energy of the earth that feels most appropriate for us. And you can name this, whatever feels appropriate. I often name this energy the energy of stability. The earth is stability. And when I think about that, when I name that, that energy of the earth really comes into focus. I feel the stability radiating from the earth. You know, some of you may call it groundedness. Some of you may call it, the energy of nurturing or foundational energy or still energy, whatever is appropriate for you, but to name it. Naming it is important at this point. So once you've named that energy, again, we're going to imagine inhaling that energy into the base of the spine, into the root chakra. So you're inhaling from the earth as if like you're in, like your lungs are the root chakra, the tail, the bottom of the spine. And as you Inhale, you're just inhaling from the earth into the chakra itself. You're inhaling that energy you've made. And exhaling, but not thinking about the exhale right now, just focusing on inhaling into the root chakra and just exhaling. If you're not working with the breath, just imagine that the root chakra, the toe of the spine, is just absorbing that energy from the earth. It's seeping up into the tail of the spine, right? And just coming right into the chakra. This is practicing with this just for a few moments here. Just a few more moments. Now, as the root chakra begins to fill up with the energy of the earth, imagine that that chakra becomes stable. It's beginning to stabilize. It feels grounded. Now, if you want to add another level of visualization to this, you can imagine that that root chakra begins to glow with this light, this red light, which is the color we associate with the root chakra. So it's growing, radiating this grounding red energy throughout the body. And if you want to go a little bit further, again, visualization isn't necessary. So if you're struggling with visualization, it's okay. The practice still works. As long as you just believe that this is happening, and engage with it as much as you can, you can experience a lot of impact. But to go a little further for those of you, who may want a little more, you can slowly begin to imagine that the body is translucent. Like the body is like a balloon, a balloon filled with that's inflated, filled with air. You can see through the body. And you can see down to the base of the spine. And you can see the root chakra, this ball of red light, radiating soft red light up into the body. So it's like you become like a red balloon, radiating this red light. And just sitting with that, as you breathe up into the base of the spine, the root chakra, exhaling, imagining that the root chakra is just radiating this red light throughout the body, and you're just beginning to illuminate this energy. That's not the main practice we'll stick at, but this is just something to work with just for a few moments as we move to the next stage of the practice. Okay. I'm going to add, I think, maybe kind of a new, um, newish practice for many of us. So we are moving into the internal exhale. So that means we're releasing breath and energy into the body. But the modification here is that we're going to imagine that we're exhaling that energy directly up into the heart chakra where we've been holding the energy of our prayers in. So let's go through it just step by step. Okay. So again, inhaling into the root chakra, the base of the spine, holding that energy and breath there for just a second. And then as we prepare to exhale, we imagine that we exhale from the base of the spine into the heart center. And imagine that that heart center begins to be infused, saturated with this earth energy, along with the energy that's already present in the heart center. Okay. So again, inhaling into the root chakra, holding the breath and energy there for a second, and releasing that energy up into the heart center. Now, if you're not working with the breath, just kind of imagining that this energy is coming into the root chakra and then it is releasing up into the heart center where it, posits itself, saturates the heart center. And we're not necessarily imagining an experience here. I just want you just to allow that energy to make its way up into the heart center. And just let those energies mingle and merge and do whatever they need to do. You can notice what happens. You can notice your experience. So one of the experiences that we can have is that we begin to maybe feel some warmth, kind of awakening in the heart center, some expansion, maybe a little bit of lightness. So I want to add one more stage to the practice, and then I just want to do a couple moments of working with our heart chakra. I'm sorry, working with the mantra. So, starting from the very beginning again, inhaling into the root chakra, holding the breath, releasing that breath in the internal exhale up into the heart center, releasing that breath in the heart center. Now, the next stage, breathing into the heart center, inhaling to the heart center, holding the breath for a few moments, and then releasing that breath internally throughout the whole body. So it's as if the whole body is just like feeling this flow, this current of breath and energy, from the very top of our heads down to our toes and fingers and everything. Every extremity of our body feels this energy, this internal exhale. And so if you're not using the breath again, just like absorbing that energy into the root chakra, imagine it moving up into the heart center, releasing out. Or really releasing out from the heart center into the rest of the body. And this is will be our prayer offering for this session. It's just holding those prayers in our heart centers and letting these energies feed those prayers. As these energies feed those prayers, they also take care of the suffering that we experience. Wanting these prayers to, to be realized, to get what we need, for others and for ourselves. Okay. So we'll go into our mantra, and I just want you to maintain, this practice. Tea Tao Bacon say, Maha Bacon say, Lasa Sumangate, Soha, prayer to medicine Buddha for healing. Okay. So we're evoking the consciousness of medicine Buddha, that begins to awaken the energy and actually begins to stabilize the subtle energy body. And if we kind of let go a little bit, we actually start getting into that non-linearism, which can actually, this is also part of our healing. This is all in fixation to form and to order, which allows, when we let that go, that fixation, that rigidity, it makes room for other experiences to arise and to be present that perhaps are much more liberating than the energy or experience of rigidity. Okay, so we'll begin. Oh, te begenze, maha begenze, raza sumungates ua. Te begenze, la begenze, raza sumungates ua. Te begenze, ma 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 begenze, raza sumungates ua. Te ata un be You're working with the breath. I invite you just to take a deep breath in. We're going to do this 3 times. Take a deep breath in, filling up the whole body. And when we release it, imagine that you're releasing the air from every pore opening in the body all at once. And do it twice more. And every time you release, just letting go of everything that feels stuck or heavy or overwhelming. Okay? 2 more times. When you're ready, shift your attention back to the weight of the body making contact with your seat, letting that sensation of the body making contact with the seat ground your attention. Reconnecting to the earth as well, touching your attention down into the earth, allowing the energy of your attention or your consciousness to meet the energy of the earth, allowing the earth to ground your attention, your consciousness back into this timeline, this moment, this space. When you're ready, moving into some simple movements, maybe some shaking, some tapping, gently, just some shimmying, some shoulder rolls, some head rolls. Shaking it all out. Maybe even massaging the space with massaging the face a little bit. Okay. So we're gonna move into reciting offering Shantadeva's prayer, which is in the chat box as well. And recite this 3 times. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space, and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures. And until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures. And until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. And lastly, may I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much for your practice. I know there are questions, but we'll do them next week. If you asked a question, just remember to post it again um, next week for practice. Okay. Um, yeah, check the calendars, the schedules, and everything. And we have Mahamudra for the people again on Friday with Lama Justin and then all the practice groups, including Sparsha. Um, and then we'll have stuff coming up. Sister Sadara and I will be offering another Dharma Queens show on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you can check that out if you want. And it's going to be Instagram Live at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. All right. So just advice, I would after this do some movement, some walking, pacing, some asanas or stretches, gentle movements. Put on some music and dance. Um, Shake some of this energy out, get it going. Have lots of water um, as well, and pay attention to your dreams as well. Um, just let me know next week what your experiences have been after the practice. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I hope to see you all again sometime this week and whatever program you show up in. Okay. Thank you.